A story you will not be able to hold back your tears. Once upon a time, he was the prince of Makkah with his wealth, his looks, his youth. He was charismatic and very handsome. All eyes were on him. When he walked through the streets, people came out to their doors waiting just to see him. Palaces, a powerful family, a bright future, everything was under his feet. But he knew that everything was temporary. Deep inside his soul, with a huge emptiness that could not be filled, he was searching for what is eternal. Until he met him that day, everything changed forever. First he changed, then the flow of history changed. He came and he showed that Islam is not only the religion of the weak and the poor. This video is about Musab ibn Umayr. We believe he is watching us from the barzakh. You will feel him beside you. You are watching. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, support us with your comments and shares. If you are ready, let's begin. Bismillah. Ramanirahim, the courtyard of the Kaaba. The sun falls on the stones and the shadows grow shorter in that place, beating like the heart of Makkah. The companions are sitting and talking among themselves through the narration of Ali. We listen to that small circle sitting there on that day. Then someone appears from a distance. His walk is familiar, but he does not look like before. Musab bin Umayr is coming, but this is not the Musa known as the most admired young man of Makkah. His hair is messy. He's wearing a patched cloak. The old Musab is gone. The young man people used to turn and look at, the one who since stayed in the streets he passed, is no longer there. It is as if a completely different life is walking in the same body at that moment. It is not only the companions who notice the messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam also sees him before Musab even comes close. The eyes of the messenger of Allah fill with tears, and he begins to cry because the messenger of Allah knows Musab's former life very well. He says, "Do you see this young man? He was the most beloved child of his parents in Makkah. People admired him for what he wore, what he ate, and what he used, but the love of Allah and his messenger overcame everything in his heart. And now that young man is paying the price of that love." This scene is not a biography. This is a breaking point. Now we will go back to that time and reflect. Even though it is very hard to think about what he lived through, we will talk about the roads he walked. During his Hijrah, Musab bin Umayr was from the Abdud Dar family of Quraysh, the most powerful tribe of Makkah. This family had an idol in the Kaaba called Dar, and their name also carried the meaning of being servants of that idol. They were a noble family responsible for guarding the key and the cover of the Kaaba. They also held a very high duty in wars, such as carrying the battle flag. Musab was born into such a family in the year 585. His death would later come in the year 625. At the age of 40, his title was the Good Musab, a name given to him by the Prophet. His father was Umar ibn Hashim, and his mother is mentioned in the sources as Kunaz bint Malik. She was one of the richest, most powerful, and most influential women in Makkah, known for her harsh and strict character. Very soon this name would stand at the center of Musab's greatest test. But before we reach that point, we need to understand why the scene in that courtyard was so powerful. In the books of Sirah, Musab is described as one of the wealthiest and most well-groomed young men of Makkah. Before Islam, people talked about his clothing. He wore the most expensive clothes with gold embroidery, used gold and jewelry. And it is said that people recognized him by his scent. Wherever he walked, those who saw his beauty admired him. Some Syria books even mention that he resembled the Prophet in his youth. At night, Musab would enjoy himself with his friends on Mount Safa and Mount Hanaim. During the day, they would race horses in the open lands of Makkah. Laughter, songs, endless feasts. Although he lived like the Prince of Makkah, something inside him was missing. There was an emptiness. All this glory, all this wealth could not fill it. Deep in his soul, there was a search he could not name. Like people today, he tried to fill this emptiness with entertainment, worldly pleasures, food, clothing, people's looks, and the desire to be liked and accepted. But just like people today, he failed, because the truth that hearts find peace only in the remembrance of Allah was true then and is still true today. It is a universal reality, but Musab had not yet met this truth. He was a young man who had reached the age of 25, and one day destiny began to weave its web. As he was walking through the streets of Makkah, he passed through a dark, smoky street filled with blacksmith shops. Between the sounds of hammers, the first spark of a journey was about to ignite, a journey that would completely change his life, take him out of a golden cage, throw him into fire, and at the same time carry him to endless peace. That day he was passing in front of the shop of the blacksmith, Habib bin Arat. This was the hidden side of the city. It did not match Musab's refined and comfortable world at all, yet his feet were drawn toward Habib's shop, as if by a magnet. Habib was standing by the fire, striking red-hot iron sweat flowing down his forehead. He was from the oppressed and humiliated class of Makkah, but in his heart, he carried a fire that the leaders of Makkah did not have. Musab stopped in front of the shop. His shadow fell inside. Habib lifted his head and froze. What was the most noble young man of Makkah doing in front of this smoky shop? Habib's eyes were fixed on Musa. He fell into deep thoughts and forgot what he was doing. If only a young man from such a noble family became Muslim. Yes, Habib was already Muslim, and from his heart he wished that this young man would also meet Islam. When he saw Musab, he became lost in this hope. Without realizing it, the burning iron touched his hand, but there was no sign of pain on Habib's face. Musab rushed forward in fear and said, "Oh Habib, don't you realize your hand is burning?" Habib was startled, but not from pain. He smiled with deep peace. At that moment, the wall between noble and slave collapsed. Habib gave the answer that would pass into history. "The fire in my heart did not let me feel the fire in my hand." "Oh Musab." Musab paused and said, "Oh Habib, do you know that the same fire is inside me too? What is the reason for the fire in your heart?" And then Habib spoke the words that would carry him to faith. He told him about our Prophet and what he was calling people to when Musab heard these truths, he became deeply excited. He had been searching for this for years without knowing it. Answers were coming to the voice that had echoed in the emptiness inside him for so long. His eyes filled with tears, and with a trembling voice he whispered, "When will you take me to him?" Habib saw the sincerity in Musab's eyes. This was not a passing desire, it was the cry of the soul, but the danger was great. The men of Abu Jahl were everywhere. In a whisper, he explained the plan. "Not now, oh Musab, eyes are on us. When Makkah falls asleep in the midday heat, when the streets are empty, come, I will take you to al-Arkam." Midday came as the sun burned Makkah. The streets fell into silence. Everyone withdrew into the shade. The city entered the sleep of Kailula, but one person was awake. Musab was very close to the purpose of his existence. Wrapped in his elegant clothes, he moved through the streets. While hiding in the shadows, he walked toward that house at the foot of Mount Safa, the house of Arkham. His heart felt like it would burst from his chest. This walk was not only toward a house, but toward a new world. The door opened slightly. He stepped inside. Unlike the burning heat outside, inside there was an indescribable coolness and peace. When his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he saw them, the oppressed of Makkah, the slaves, but also nobles like Abu Bakr and Ali. They were sitting knee to knee, shoulder to shoulder. There was no class system, no difference between rich and poor, and at the head of the room was he, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. These were the early years of prophethood, and the number inside was small. When the messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam saw Musab, a gentle smile appeared on his blessed face. Musab was now looking at the most beautiful face he had ever seen in his life. All the beauty his mother had once offered him felt like a dim candle next to this light. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam allowed Musab to sit close by his side, and then the language of the heavens opened. Quran verses began to flow from the lips of the messenger of Allah. Each verse filled the emptiness in Musab's soul and wiped away the rust from his heart. Before the words even finished, Musab's soul surrendered. There was no doubt left. No, but no, if right there in that dim room of Arkham's house, the most spoiled young man of Makkah died, and in his place a hero of faith was born. When he spoke the Shahada, he was no longer the old Musab. When he stepped outside, the sun was still the same sun, and Makkah was still Makkah. But for Musab, everything had changed. Now he carried on his shoulders a burden far heavier than his Yemeni silk cloak, yet far more honorable faith. But the road back home was more dangerous than the road he had taken to come, because waiting for him at home was a sharp-minded mother, always watching him closely. Kunas, and the fire that burned in Habib's heart was now about to surround Musab's home. Meanwhile, let us briefly talk about that secret house where the Muslims gathered and about their situation to better understand the time. Arkam, from the tribe of Abu Jahl, had accepted Islam secretly. Because of this, the house was called Dar al-Arkam, meaning the house of Arkam. It was close to Mount Safa in a quiet and unnoticeable location. No one was suspicious because it was seen as the house of someone from Abu Jahl's tribe, so it was a very wise and strategic choice at that time. There were only about 15 to 20 believers. Arkam himself was very young. Just like Musab, he opened his home and became one of the first Muslims who helped spread Islam.
Even in the
today.
deepest darkness,
for people like Musab ibn Umayr to become Muslim, there must also be people like Habib, those who can bring them out from that hidden mine, and young people like Arkam, their peers. So how did Habib become the means for Musab to find Islam? Because his heart was burning, and with that fire he was able to ignite Musab as well. Why are we unable to influence even our closest people today, our neighbors, our family? Because our hearts do not speak. Everything stays in our minds and disappears. We must be among those whose hearts burn, not just whose tongues speak. There must be such a fire in one state that before words flames rise from the heart, because we know this truth: one who does not burn cannot ignite others. May Allah make us among those who are devoted to this cause with their hearts, whose hearts are burning. May Allah grant all of us a new beginning. Through this video, after Musab bin Umayr met faith, the messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, Musab's mother Kunas said to him, Do not tell your mother at home. Musab was careful and kept it hidden with his tongue, but what about his state? Musab left the house of Arkam and returned to his palace like home, to that magnificent house, but now those walls felt narrow to him. Neither the soft beds nor the delicious food placed before him meant anything anymore. Musab was silent, his eyes drifted into the distance, and his lips quietly repeated the verses he had heard in Dar al-Arkam, but his mother's intuition was strong. Kunas noticed this change in her son. Within a few days, the cheerful Musab, who used to walk around with his friends and spend hours decorating himself in front of the mirror, was gone. In his place stood a young man who was deep in thought, calm, dignified, and distant from the world. Kunas became suspicious. What happened to my son? As someone confused his mind, she kept asking herself. She acted quickly. She placed a shadow behind Musab. His cousin Osman bin Talha Osman followed Musab like a shadow. The streets narrowed, the crowds thinned, and then Osman saw it. Musab was secretly entering that house at the foot of Mount Safa, the house everyone spoke about carefully, the house where Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was. Osman rushed to Kunas out of breath. The news struck Kunas's heart like a dagger. Oh Kunas, your son Musab, he has left the religion of his ancestors. He is going in and out of the place of Abdul Mutalib's orphan. Kunas's world collapsed. At first, she did not want to believe it. Then her anger erupted like a volcano. When Musab came home, he did not find a loving mother in front of him, but a woman whose eyes were burning with fire. Speak, Musab. Kunas thundered, is what I heard true? Musab did not lie. He was now walking the path of truthfulness. He held his head high. There was no fear in his eyes, only deep compassion. Yes, mother, I believe in Allah and in his messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. At that moment, chaos broke out in the house. Kunas first tried soft words. She begged, she cried, you are the son of the noblest family of Makkah. How can you enter the religion of slaves? She said, but Musab was like someone who had boarded the ship of Nuh. Even if a flood came, he would not be shaken. When persuasion failed, that golden cage suddenly turned into a dark prison. Kunas's motherly mercy turned into terrible cruelty. The woman who once felt pain if even the wind touched her son's skin now ordered the servants, tie him up, bind him. They tied Musab to the pillars of his own house, the body that slept in silk yesterday was now tightly bound with rough ropes. Kunas took the whip in her hand. Her goal was to break his will. With every stroke she asked, will you give up? But instead of cries of pain, only one sentence came from Musab's lips. The slogan of that time he had Allah is one, Allah is one. Days passed. Musab was left hungry, left thirsty, burned under the sun, but his faith did not shake even a little. His mother was jealous of Allah over her son. She tortured him in the name of saving him, but Musab had already been saved. In the end, Kunas understood neither wealth nor beating could break the will. In front of her, helpless and full of anger, she played her final card. She had Musab untied and pointed to the door. Choose my wealth and the religion of your ancestors, or that Muhammad and poverty. If you choose Muhammad, you are no longer my son. Get out of this house. Musab felt sadness for his mother because she did not believe he chose to go to the messenger of Allah, but with the pain of his mother's disbelief in his heart. Wearing patched clothes, he walked out of that magnificent house. Musab left behind his wealth, his inheritance, his comfort, and most of all his mother. He left everything behind because he had found what is eternal. Now a young man walked the streets of Makkah with no home and no money, yet with the richest heart in the city. His direction was clear. Once again, Dar al-Arkam. Once again, the side of the messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Faith can sometimes make a person a migrant. Even in the same city, it can leave a person alone. Even in the same house, it can make a person face the whip, even from their own mother. Every person is a test for another person. Musab bin Umayr shows this to us very clearly. Sometimes the test is a mother, sometimes a wife. So what lesson should we take from the life of Musab bin Umayr here? First, yes, you will not break them. You will not be disrespectful. You will continue to love them. Second, yes, you will go to their door again and again to try to convince them, and we will soon see that Musab did this as well. But instead of trying to convince them quickly with words, convincing through behavior is more realistic. Islam spreads not only with speech but with living it and representing it, just like in the Asri Sadet. Now let us return to Musab. He was now homeless and cut off from his inheritance. Hard days had begun in Makkah. Muslims were being identified by the people of Makkah and were oppressed and tortured. Insults, beatings, threats. This was the destiny of this path. Today people ask, why does Allah not stop these wars? Why does he not stop these injustices? Why do these tortures happen when we do not know the essence of Islam? Asking these questions is natural, but Allah does not oppress. Allah gives his servant this opportunity. It is like a seed thrown into the soil. The seed is alone in darkness, and it breaks so that a sprout can come out from inside. This is a means for the soul to rise. This is not a punishment. This is not oppression. Even shaitan serves this purpose. No matter how many oppressors there are in this world, no matter how many people create hardship, in reality it is for the rising of the soul of the believers. It is to make us turn away from the world and turn our faces to Allah. It is to to make us give up everything else. We see these things as evil, but in their results they are good. And those who are evil never get a share from that good. Only those who endure oppression and remain patient receive it. And when those patient ones see what is given to them in the hereafter, they will feel shy. Maybe many of us will say, if only we had lived through a little more hardship in that world. Look at what we have been given now. We will say that what we lived through in this world, which passed like a dream in a single day, was actually very simple. May Allah make us among those who say this now. With Musab, a new and difficult journey is ahead of us. The Hijrah to Abyssinia, an escape from the suffocating atmosphere of Mecca, was planned. It was the 5th year of prophethood. Our prophet first assigned 15 people, 11 men and 4 women. They would both escape this oppression and also convey Islam in the place they went to. Notice this carefully. Islam did not have an understanding that kept women inside the house like today's radical ideas. Women, just like men, served the cause despite the conditions of that time. When we look at the first 3 people who went, we see that they were Ma'ali, meaning freed slaves, or those close to that status. One of them is the well-known Abdullah bin Masud. The other 2 are Ammar bin Rabia and his wife Layla bint Abu Hazim Aduyu. Remember who these 2 were. They were the 2 slaves who were once exposed to the violence of Umar. So who were the other 12 people? All of them were from the nobles of Makkah. Uthman and the daughter of our prophet Ruqayya, Zubair bin Awam, Abdurrahman bin Awf. One of them was Abu Huzaifa from Banu Umayyah, a noble tribe. He was the brother of Hind, the son of Utba bin Rabia, one of the important figures of Dar. Al-Nadwa was also among them. This means he was one of the most noble people of Mecca. Another was Zubair bin Awam from Bani Asad, one of the noble families of Mecca. Another was Abdurrahman ibn Awf from Bani Zura, one of the greatest merchants of Mecca. Another was Abu Salama ibn Abdul Asad and his wife Salama. They were from Bani Mahzum. There were also Osman bin Mazin and Hadib ibn Amir. You remember Suhail bin Amir, the man whom the people of Mecca called the speaker of Quraysh. Hadib ibn Amir was his own brother. Another was Suhail bin Baida. Another was Musab ibn Umayr. His mother was one of the most noble, richest, and most powerful women of Makkah. Now, even if it were not like this, there would be no issue, but there is a constant claim that Islam rose only on the shoulders of slaves and the poor. The reason we explain this in such detail is to break this wrong idea, because when we look at the first 6 years at the selected students of al-Arkam who were trained directly by our prophet, Ibn Hisham says they were around 40 people, and according to other reports, more than 100. And among them we clearly see many strategic and influential people. So Islam did not rise only through slaves and the poor. On the contrary, wherever there were strategic and influential people, the Messenger of Allah invited them to Islam and also took special care of them for the future of Islam. Of course, there were also poor and weak people, but to say only them is a wrong reading of history. And when we look at today, it is a very serious mistake, because today when a Muslim dresses well, drives a luxury car, or owns big businesses and factories, unfortunately many people no longer see this person as a real Muslim. There is a strange belief that a person cannot be both rich and Muslim at the same time. We do not know if this is hatred toward wealth, but with this mindset, the heart of a successful wealthy person can never be warm toward Islam. If we say Islam grew and developed only through the poor and the weak, we say something false, because as you see, that is not true, and at the same time we push such people away, and the more we say this, the more they distance themselves from Islam. When we returned to the story, those 15 people were moving silently toward the harbor in the deep darkness of the night, so that their footsteps would not be heard. They stepped on the soft parts of the sand. These people had become refugees for the sake of their faith. Does this remind you of today? And Musab was among them. He was no longer wearing expensive silk clothes. His shoes were worn out. The desert wind burned his face, but he felt peace walking shoulder to shoulder with his companions. The young man who was once a prince in his mother's palace was now a stranger on the deck of an old ship heading toward the unknown. On the way to Abyssinia, they reached Abyssinia and stayed there for about 3 months. It was a just place. They were able to breathe a little. Then one day news came from across the sea. The people of Makkah prostrated. The polytheists became Muslim. This news was actually a wrong interpretation of what happened when Surah Najm was recited, and the polytheists also prostrated without realizing it. But the hearts of the believers in exile were burning with longing for their homeland, and more than anything with the desire to see our prophet again. So without questioning the news, they set out on the road. According to the laws of Makkah, someone who left the city could only return under the protection of a powerful person. Uthman bin Affan was protected by his relatives. Others were protected by their tribes. But what about Musab? His mother Kana had given a strict order to all relatives: no one will give protection to Musab. He will come back to my door needy and humiliated. Musab stood alone at the gates of the city, but he did not lower himself or beg his mother. He sent word to Nadir bin Haris, one of the most evil men of Makkah, known for his sharp tongue. In Arab custom, asking for protection was sacred. Even though Nadir was an enemy, He could not refuse this request under the protection of a polytheist. Musab entered the city where he was born with his head held high. When they entered Makkah, the painful truth hit them. The news was false. The polytheists had not become Muslim. On the contrary, their anger had grown even stronger. As soon as Musab entered Makkah, he went straight to al-Arkam. When his mother Kunis heard that her son had returned to Makkah, she waited with a small hope. Maybe hardship has brought him back to his senses. She said she sent her other son Abu Aziz as a spy. When Abu Aziz returned, he was surprised. Mother Musab has not changed. There is no regret, no surrender. He has only become stronger. Kunis went mad with anger, but Musab had not given up on his mother. Once again he went to that house and invited her to Islam. Once again he was rejected. Once again he was insulted. As he returned sadly to al-Arkam, he heard the sound of a door behind him. The one who came was his other brother Abu Rumi. Musab was surprised. He had never spoken to Abu Rumi about Islam. His brother spoke breathlessly. "O Musab, since you left, I have been watching you leaving. That luxury and living this hardship, and yet the peace on your face, your state burned my heart. I also want to believe." Musab smiled. He understood that the greatest dawah is not speaking too much, but living. Words were silent. Musab's state was speaking. Today we often misunderstand dawah. We speak more, represent less, and maybe believe less. Sometimes we do not even practice what we say, or we speak from above, from the ego. How do we expect to win such a person if people do not believe the one who speaks? We must first look at ourselves. We should pray for their guidance, be good friends to them, be close, and act with love and mercy. All prophets and companions walked this path. Even to those who insulted them, they often responded with mercy. Just as we are weak in representation, we also struggle to apply these principles in dawah. May Allah help us change our hearts and make them like the heart of Musab. Musab was very happy for his newly Muslim brother Abu Rumi and took him with him, but Makkah was no longer livable. Torture had increased and death plans were being made in Dar al-Nadwa. A second Hijrah order came this time. It was larger, 83 men and 18 women. Musab set out again, this time with his brother Abu Rumi. This journey would be long. A separation of many years was beginning, but the real role Allah had prepared for Musab would not be written in Abyssinia. It would later be written in the city then called Yathrib, among the palm trees, the city of destiny. The polytheists of Makkah were worried after the first Hijrah of 15 people. The number had now reached 101. They gathered again in Dar al-Nadwa, places of evil plans. Among them was Amr bin As, who had not yet believed at that time. He was a close friend of the Abyssinian king Najashi. Amr said, "Let us go as a delegation. I will convince Najashi." He went and spoke to Najashi. He accused the 101 Muslims who had migrated, spoke badly about them, but Najashi was a just king. He said, "I want to call them and listen to them as well." He called a group from among the Muslims. Just as Najashi was about to listen, Amir continued, "Look, Najashi, these people also speak badly about Isa, whom you believe in." Najashi was shocked. Yes, the enemies of Islam knew very well where to touch then, just as they do today. Najashi asked the Muslim group, "What do you really think about Isa?" Jafar bin Abu Talib spoke and recited the verses from Surah Maryam related exactly to this topic, not random verses, but the verses directly connected to the question. When Najashi heard them, he could not hold back his tears. He said, "Even if you give me all the riches of the world, I will not give you up." He arranged a ship in Abyssinia and said, "You can make this ship your home for as long as you wish." He protected them and refused to hand them over to the people of Makkah. After staying there for 4 years, 38 people who longed for the messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam returned. Among those who returned were Musab and his brother Abu Rumi. This return is known in history as the return in the 10th year. Do you know what the 10th year means? It was the end of the period when Muslims were boycotted and tortured in Abu Talib Valley from the 7th year to the 10th year in Makkah, and in the exact year these people returned, the boycott was lifted at the same time. This year is known as the year of sadness, because in that year the messenger of Allah lost his uncle Abu Talib and his